Mark Kember, I'm Chief Executive of the Climate Group. I've worked here for 10 years, the last 3 years CEO. I started working on climate change about 18 years ago now, and like many people who work on climate change now, once you're in, because it's all-encompassing. It covers our economic system, our energy system, our environment, the way we work, the way we do business, and it's addictive. And I found it very compelling, and I've worked in Ecuador. I set up the Ecuadorian National Climate Change Office and the CDM office there. I then worked for the World Wildlife Fund as one of their senior policy officers working on emissions trading. I was deeply involved in setting up the European Emissions Trading Scheme as one of the NGO representatives. And as I say, I've worked at the Climate Group for getting on for 10 years now, initially as the policy director and the last 3 years as CEO. I'm the acting chair of the BP Target Neutral Advisory and Assurance Panel. Target Neutral's been around for a few years now, trying to create an offering for initially its private customers and now business customers, whereby they can reduce their net impact on the climate. For example, Target Neutral working with FedEx. FedEx now has an advantage in the market because it is a carbon neutral courier, whereas its competitors aren't. And if it can offer the same service with a better environmental footprint at a lower price or at the same price, then that provides us with a market advantage amongst initially with that segment that are environmentally aware. But as companies and individuals take on environmental commitments, then it's in a way for them to say, look, we are doing everything we possibly can to fulfill our obligations to the planet and the society. Where people use carbon neutral lubricants, then they can say, look, this is part of our overall commitment. We can reduce our carbon footprint. Therefore, we are improving year on year, and that's what customers and stakeholders expect. Reduce, replace and neutralise are three components of an integrated strategy that can be used by individuals and by businesses, by large organisations, to reduce their impact on the environment and in particular on climate change. Know what your carbon footprint is. If you can't measure it, if you don't understand it, there's no way you can start taking steps to reduce it. Then look at where you can reduce them, and the first step is to look at energy efficiency improvements. And those might be about better insulation, better planning of your buildings, many options in that case. So you can reduce emissions a lot through energy efficiency. Then you can look at replacing. What are the main sources of emissions? So it may be you're buying your electricity that's coming from coal-fired power stations. Can you switch to renewable electricity? And then there are always unavoidable residual emissions, some journeys that you'll have to take by car. So the third part of the strategy is to neutralise. How can you effectively reduce your impact to zero, net zero, by helping others reduce their emissions in other parts of the world and therefore compensating your own emissions? And that might be, having calculated your emissions, you're left after all your reduction and replacement activities with, say, 3 or 4 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year. You can invest in a project that reduces those same 3 or 4 tonnes of carbon dioxide elsewhere, and that will offset or compensate or neutralise your own emissions. Castrol has done a lot of work trying to create lubricants that make engines run even more efficiently than they do at the moment, whether they be petrol, diesel or any other kind of engine. But I think Castrol's also realised that we really need to address climate change now rather than next week or next year. They can play a role, both a practical role by becoming a carbon neutral company, providing carbon neutral products so that effectively net zero carbon alongside their efforts to make engines more efficient. And that's has a very practical value, saying to the world, look, as part of a large oil and gas company, we're taking climate change seriously and we're taking actions to match those words.